Worms of the Earth by Robert E. Howard. Chapter 4. The cold grey mists of dawn wrapped King Bran like a clammy cloak. He turned to the woman whose slanted eyes gleamed in the grey gloom. "Make good your part of the contract," he said roughly. "I sought a link between worlds, and in you I found it. I seek the one thing sacred to them. It shall be the key, opening the door that lies unseen between me and them. Tell me how I can reach it." "I will," the red lips smiled terribly. "Go to the mound men call Dagon's Barrow. Draw aside the stone that blocks the entrance and go under the dome of the mound. The floor of the chamber is made of 7 great stones, 6 grouped about the 7th. Lift out the center stone, and you will see." "Will I find the black stone?" he asked. "Dagon's Barrow is the door to the black stone," she answered, "if you dare follow the road." "Will the symbol be well guarded?" He unconsciously loosened his blade in its sheath. The red lips curled mockingly. "If you meet any on the road, you will die as no mortal man has died for long centuries. The stone is not guarded as men guard their treasures. Why should they guard what man has never sought? Perhaps they will be near, perhaps not. It is a chance you must take if you wish the stone. Beware, King of Pictdom. Remember it was your folk who, so long ago, cut the thread that bound them to human life. They were almost human then. They overspread the land and knew the sunlight. Now they have drawn apart. They know not the sunlight, and they shun the light of the moon. Even the starlight they hate. Far, far apart have they drawn, who might have been men in time, but for the spears of your ancestors." The sky was overcast with misty grey, through which the sun shone coldly yellow when Bran came to Dagon's Barrow, a round hillock overgrown with rank grass of a curious fungoid appearance. On the eastern side of the mound showed the entrance of a crudely built stone tunnel, which evidently penetrated the barrow. One great stone blocked the entrance to the tomb. Bran laid hold of the sharp edges and exerted all his strength. It held fast. He drew his sword and worked the blade between the blocking stone and the sill. Using the sword as a lever, he worked carefully and managed to loosen the great stone and wrench it out. A foul charnel house scent flowed out of the aperture, and the dim sunlight seemed less to illuminate the cavern-like opening than to be fouled by the rank darkness which clung there. Sword in hand, ready for he knew not what, Bran groped his way into the tunnel, which was long and narrow, built up of heavy-joined stones, and was too low for him to stand erect. Either his eyes became somewhat accustomed to the gloom, or the darkness was, after all, somewhat lightened by the sunlight, filtering in through the entrance. At any rate, he came into a round, low chamber, and was able to make out its general dome-like outline. Here, no doubt, in old times, had reposed the bones of him, for whom the stones of the tomb had been joined and the earth heaped high above them. But now of those bones no vestige remained on the stone floor, and bending close and straining his eyes, Bran made out the strange, startlingly regular pattern of that floor. 6 well-cut slabs clustered about a 7th, 6-sided stone. He drove his sword point into a crack and pried carefully. The edge of the central stone tilted slightly upward. A little work, and he lifted it out and leaned it against the curving wall. Straining his eyes downward, he saw only the gaping blackness of a dark well with small, worn steps that led downward and out of sight. He did not hesitate. Though the skin between his shoulders crawled curiously, he swung himself into the abyss and felt the clinging blackness swallow him. Groping downward, he felt his feet slip and stumble on steps too small for human feet. With one hand pressed hard against the side of the well, he steadied himself, fearing a fall into unknown and unlighted depths. The steps were cut into solid rock, yet they were greatly worn away. The farther he progressed, the less like steps they became, mere bumps of worn stone. Then the direction of the shaft changed sharply. It still led down, but at a shallow slant down which he could walk, elbows braced against the hollowed sides, head bent low beneath the curved roof. The steps had ceased altogether, and the stone felt slimy to the touch like a serpent's lair. What beings, Bran wondered, had slithered up and down this slanting shaft for how many centuries? The tunnel narrowed, until Bran found it rather difficult to shove through. He lay on his back and pushed himself along with his hands, feet first. Still he knew he was sinking deeper and deeper into the very guts of the earth. How far below the surface he was, he dared not contemplate. Then ahead a faint witch-fire gleam tinged the abysmal blackness. He grinned savagely and without mirth. If they he sought came suddenly upon him, how could he fight in that narrow shaft? But he had put the thought of personal fear behind him when he began this hellish quest. He crawled on, thoughtless of all else but his goal. And he came at last into a vast space where he could stand upright. He could not see the roof of the place, but he got an impression of dizzying vastness. The blackness pressed in on all sides, and behind him he could see the entrance to the shaft from which he had just emerged. A black well in the darkness, but in front of him a strange grisly radiance glowed about a grim altar built of human skulls. The source of that light he could not determine, but on the altar lay a sullen night-black object. The black stone. Bran wasted no time in giving thanks that the guardians of the grim relic were nowhere near. He caught up the stone and, gripping it under his left arm, crawled into the shaft. When a man turns his back on peril, its clammy menace looms more grisly than when he advances upon it. So Bran, crawling back up the nighted shaft with his grisly prize, felt the darkness turn on him and slink behind him, grinning with dripping fangs. Clammy sweat beaded his flesh, and he hastened to the best of his ability, ears strained for some stealthy sound, to betray that fell shapes were at his heels. Strong shudders shook him, despite himself, and the short hair on his neck prickled, as if a cold wind blew at his back. When he reached the first of the tiny steps, he felt as if he had attained to the outer boundaries of the mortal world. Up them he went, stumbling and slipping, and with a deep gasp of relief, came out into the tomb, whose spectral greyness seemed like the blaze of noon in comparison to the Stygian depths he had just traversed. He replaced the central stone and strode into the light of the outer day, and never was the cold yellow light of the sun more grateful, as it dispelled the shadows of black-winged nightmares of fear and madness that seemed to have ridden him up out of the black deeps. He shoved the great blocking stone back into place, and picking up the cloak he had left at the mouth of the tomb, he wrapped it about the black stone and hurried away, a strong revulsion and loathing shaking his soul and lending wings to his strides. A grey silence brooded over the land. It was desolate as the blind side of the moon, yet Bran felt the potentialities of life. Under his feet, in the brown earth, sleeping, but how soon to waken, and in what horrific fashion. He came through the tall masking reeds to the still deep men called Dagon's Mere. No slightest ripple ruffled the cold blue water, to give evidence of the grisly monster legend said dwelt beneath. Bran closely scanned the breathless landscape. He saw no hint of life, human or unhuman. He sought the instincts of his savage soul to know if any unseen eyes fixed their lethal gaze upon him and found no response. He was alone as if he were the last man alive on earth. Swiftly, he unwrapped the black stone, and as it lay in his hands like a solid, sullen block of darkness, he did not seek to learn the secret of its material, nor scan the cryptic characters carved thereon. Weighing it in his hands and calculating the distance, he flung it far out, so that it fell almost exactly in the middle of the lake. A sullen splash and the waters closed over it. There was a moment of shimmering flashes on the bosom of the lake. Then the blue surface stretched placid and unrippled again,